Hello and welcome aboard the Talkin Texans podcast. We are recording this on Wednesday, July 19th, 2023. Houston Texans training camp is less than a week away. I am Paul Gallant, host of the Paul Gallant Show, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 from 10 to noon every weekday. He is DJ Bien-Aime, the Houston Texans beat reporter for ESPN. And DJ, I can imagine for you, this has got to be the most exciting season on the horizon since you've come over to join this team, or excuse me, to cover this team.
Well, wait a minute. This was my second season. I mean, last season was
Yeah.
it was just boring. I think that was probably like the more saddening aspect was just it was boring. There's nothing wrong with covering a bad team. Like bad teams happen. I think the worst is covering a boring team. Like a super boring team. And last year was as boring as it could get. Like the quarterback situation was boring. They didn't really have any. Like you knew the head coach was probably a lame duck. I mean, there just wasn't really much to wrap your arms around. I mean, the most interesting thing was Brandon Cooks asking for a trade.
I know.
I mean, and it was crazy is like you couldn't even find like a teammate to be like, man, F Brandon Cooks, man. Da 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 da. We want guys that want to be here. We don't want hostages. Everybody was like, I feel him. Or like we're like, nah, he's still a good teammate. Da da da. Nobody talk bad about it. That's why whenever you saw people on Twitter, and even some radio guys, I gotta say that
Me.
that would say like Brandon Cooks quit on the team. Brandon Cooks is a bad teammate. Brandon Cooks is cancer. It's like, no, he's not, because you can only be that if your team thinks that. So if your team does not think that, then you cannot be that. You know what I mean? When we talk about those type of discussions, cancer, bad teammate, quit on the team, if they don't think that, then I can't think that. Fans can't think that. You can feel some type of way as a fan or whatnot of like how he went about it. Cool, but everything else that's attached to it, cancerous labels to bad teammate. Again, those labels are created based off of what people in the locker rooms are telling reporters, and then you go ahead and report that, obviously anonymously, but you report that and you go from there. And that's how those narratives are created. But if players say nah, because again, like even when he got traded, like players were still saying on Twitter, stop the narrative of him being a bad teammate. But again, that was the only thing that was interesting last year.
It really was.
And week 18 when they cost themselves the number one overall.
What about week 1 when they tied?
Was that interesting? Yeah, that was interesting.
It was interesting because they could have won it.
Yeah. What's so funny about ties is when
They're un-American?
Players. What?
They're un-American?
Yeah, they're very un-American. They're yeah. What's so funny about ties is like, especially because again, like at all the major sports in America, I mean, you could throw soccer. I mean, you could throw soccer in there, but like those are the only few that like, okay, there is a chance there may not be a winner at the end of the game. Where everything else is, there's going to be a winner at the end of the game, no matter how many sets, no matter whether it's hundreds of thousands of second, or whether it's we go to 5, 7 overtimes, whatever it is. It's only NFL, because even college, college football doesn't have ties.
Right.
They play 1 million overtimes. That Texas A&M LSU game a few years back, but it went to 7 overtimes.
Yeah.
So like NFL is like one of the few like pro sports leagues in America that does not. And then sometimes you can have a tie, and when you talk to players about it, like it's always so weird because like what do you ask them, like some players will be like, yeah, that just lets us know we're really close. We just went to overtime with the Colts. Couldn't find out the Colts were also horrific. So so it's tricky, man. Like the tie thing is always interesting because
it's the worst. It's just the worst.
Yeah,
but next year, I don't think we'll be the worst, DJ. And training camp starts a week from now. Your boots on the ground. You'll be able to go to the whole practices. I'm only going to be able to go to some of the practices. Let's start off with the obvious. We know that we're going to be focusing on CJ Stroud a lot. We're going to be focusing on Derek Stingley a lot. We're going to be focusing on Will Anderson a lot. But right now, what do you think you'll be focusing on the most when you go to these practices?
The most, so probably trenches, mainly because CJ Stroud, like that's obviously like the biggest headline, right? So we're gonna be focusing on that. But for me, since he doesn't have like a proven, right? We could be shocked and someone turns into like, that 12, 1,300 yard receiver, da 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 da. But right now we don't. There's not got proof like that's proven to be that. So since we don't have that, it's going to come down to how good could the offensive line be, right? Can they hold up long enough throughout the year to give CJ Stroud that tick of an extra second, to give that receiver also a tick of an extra second to get open, or so they can run, or can they be dominant up front enough to where the O line in the running game, Damian Pierce, Devin Singletary, can bust up through the middle, bust up through the middle and whatever, make things happen left and right. You know what I'm saying? To take pressure off of CJ, because I know we're going to focus so much on CJ. And for rookies, a lot of it comes down to what's around you. Like, again, as we talked about before, there's been no rookie quarterback that's won Rookie of the Year outside of maybe Kyler Murray that ain't have a good supporting cast around them. Justin Herbert had a good supporting cast. Joe Burrow, even though he didn't win, he had a good supporting cast he had a decent supporting cast from a receiver standpoint. He had T. Higgins. A lot of people think T. Higgins is number one, and I think he's number one. What's it called? Andrew Luck, his first year, he had T.Y. Hilton. Who else? Robert Griffin. He had Pierre Garçon. So that year, I remember I said he had like 1,300. He had 1,300 the following year. But that first year, he had like 600-ish, but he was hurt. But he averaged like around like 70 yards receiving or something in that vein. So if you extrapolate that throughout an entire season, now you have a 1,000-yard type of guy. So again, like the list goes on and on and on. Even Cam, he had Steve Smith. So right now, on paper, the Texans don't have that type of guy. Maybe he shows up, maybe Nico's developing today, maybe Robert Woods refers back into that. But since we don't have that right now on paper, what I'm focusing on is the O-line. Can be the driving force for this offense to be able to run the ball with consistency and give CJ Stroud extra time to hit his receivers? Because again, like, if they're not able to hold up the end of the bargain, CJ has no shot of even looking decent this year.
3 guys on that offensive line are pretty much locked in. It's Laramie Tunsil at left tackle. It's Titus Howard at right tackle. And at, I think, right guard, it's going to be Shaq Mason, assuming that he's healthy. The real question is left guard with Kenyon Green, where I think it remains to be seen whether or not he is going to be ready to go at the very start of training camp, which seemed to be a problem for him last year. Health, I think, probably kept him behind the 8 ball as far as learning what he had to do in that Texans offense. And then on top of that, I think you pen in Juice Scruggs as the center going into the season. But remember, he's a second-round rookie, and it wasn't that long ago where the Texans drafted Nick Martin in the second round, and there were some good moments with Nick Martin as center. But you never know when you're drafting somebody and throwing him right into the fire on the offensive line. There's obviously expectations attached to both, given that they're both first and second round picks. And as you said, yeah, we don't know what CJ Stroud's going to have to throw to, but we know that he has to have guys in front of him that are going to keep him upright.
Yeah, I completely agree there. So I think that's probably the most important thing. And then on the opposite side, like D'Amico Ryan's system isn't going to be able to work unless he has a defensive line that can get after the quarterback. Could this year be the year where he kind of has it back in front? Yeah, sure, but eventually he's going to need his D line to carry them at times. Because again, it's a lot easier to play defense where your defensive line can cause havoc. We just saw the Eagles secondary. 3 of them have outstanding seasons: Bradbury, Slade, and Gardner Johnson. Why? What helped them? The fact that their D line had 70 sacks last year. Same with Sauce and DJ Reed. They had a phenomenal. That's a phenomenal cornerback duo. What helped them out a lot? They got Quentin Williams coming up the middle. You have Carl Lawson coming off the edge. You have John Franklin Myers coming off the edge. And they were causing havoc. And the list goes on and on and on. So if the D line can eventually, if I see the signs that, okay, well, Anderson looks nice, and who else? Jerry Hughes still looks like he's drinking the fountain of youth, And Grenard is starting to show flashes again. And Malik and Sheldon, they doing their thing. All right, good. Now at least we know to start out, they'll be able to control some games and have their D line be impactful. Because again, if D line's not impactful, then it's gonna be a long season, because again, we saw what happened last year with the run game, their run defense was just putrid. They have to set the tone there, even though linebacker plays part in that too, but you still need your D line to make everybody's life easier because they're the closest guy to the ball. So these are my two things I'm watching: O line, D line.
The newcomers in the defensive line that we're hoping for a lot from helping out Malik Collins are Sheldon Rankins and Hassan Ridgeway, both of whom have played in defenses that are, we think, similar to that of what D'Amico Ryans is going to run. Rankins with the Jets, running Robert Saleh's defense, and Hassan Ridgeway with the San Francisco 49ers. So, yeah, definitely up the middle and obviously on the edges too. What is Will Anderson going to be able to bring to the table from the get-go? And yeah, I would say at the second level too, you've got a guy in Christian Harris who finished the year very strong after dealing with injuries in the first half of the year. Where is he now, given that he probably has a tremendous boost of confidence to finish the season? I think that, you're looking at the Texans linebackers top to bottom. That's the guy that you look at and have the most excitement about. And then it's a matter of, okay, well, the newcomers, and specifically Henry Tuo. Did I butcher it? I'm always nervous when I say it.
Henry To'o.
There we go. Is he going to be able to step in? Again, fifth-round pick. But out of Alabama, is he going to come in and is he going to have an impact? Like that middle area of the defense, it's so unknown. It really is. It's newcomers, it's hopefully better players, and it's young guys. And you're hoping that the young guys are really taking a big step forward with a former middle linebacker for this very organization coaching them up.
Hold on, give me a second. My AirPods, for whatever reason.
Oh, they butchered?
Nah, it didn't die. It was.
All right.
My mouse died too. Nah, so it was. You sound like you were underwater, but I think it was just this. So I'm gonna just keep this here for aesthetics. But
okay,
yeah, we can keep going.
Do you remember the last thing that I said?
I was hearing it in and out. Like it was just like.
Oh no!
But it wasn't you. I think it was just the AirPods / computer.
I can try. I can try to.
Now.
Okay, I'll try to reset where I was.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just come back to it. Okay. On the defensive line, you're bringing in a couple of guys that are familiar with defenses similar to what we're thinking D'Amico Ryans is going to run.
Yep.
Robert Saleh with the Jets.
Yep.
That means that you bring in Sheldon Rankins, Hassan Ridgeway with the 49ers. Yep. D'Amico was just there. That helps out there. On the edges, of course, you have Jerry Hughes already, and you're hoping Will Anderson's going to be a big impact. And then in the middle, at linebacker, Christian Harris is probably the most talented guy in that group. You're hoping that he takes a step forward, and you're also hoping that Henry Tuo is somebody that is going to come in as a fifth-round pick and really contribute because really, with Corey Littleton, with Denzel Perriman, I know that they've been in the league for a while. They're in their late 20s, early 30s. Are they going to make the middle of this defense, which was softer than puppy poo, is it going to be someone that does not get grounded and pounded by guys like Jonathan Taylor for 150 yards this season?
Yeah, well, I mean, we missed the linebacker spot. We'll see. Like, we can't, based off, I mean, Perriman he was a Pro Bowler in 2021, but he was hurt in 2022.
Right.
And he's even mentioned that his goal is to stay healthy because he hasn't just been able to stay healthy for the entire season. So we have that. I mean, you have Corey Littleton, who's also a Pro Bowler, but that was a while ago. I think he's on his third, fourth team. Christian Harris, you hope he can take a jump. Same with you hope that Henry Toto can transition from college to NFL, especially at the linebacker spot. Linebackers are very different. Linebacker, quarterback, and tight end are some of the hardest spots to transition from college to the NFL because you're just going to be asked to do a lot of different things that you weren't doing in college. So we'll see on that front. That we'll just see because there's a lot of questions with that unit. I think at the end of the training camp, we'll probably still, have questions. There's some weeks you gotta wait till games start, and then we'll have to reassess when we get there. So, but we made a really good point about you got Jimmy Ward. Yeah, you mentioned guys they brought in. Jimmy Ward is another guy, so he'll be able to help with the development of the secondary with the guys like Jalen Petrie, Derek Stingley, along with teaching guys like Desmond King, Tavia Thomas. Shout out to Tavia Thomas, he just got married. But again, like that, you'll be able to have Ward to implement the defensive rules and principles of that unit under D'Amico into the secondary.
I'm glad you mentioned the secondary because there will be some position battles going into this year.
Yep.
And I think that cornerback is the most interesting group top to bottom because of just the raw amount of talent that they have. We've touched on this a couple of times in past Talkin Texans episodes. This is a top 10 unit potentially, not just because of what they have at safety with Jalen Petrie coming off of that awesome productive rookie season, bringing in Jimmy Ward, who you see as a safety, but you've also seen in the past as a cornerback. And then on top of that, just the cornerback group as a whole, the former 3rd overall pick in Derek Stingley Jr., Shaquille Griffin, a past Pro Bowl cornerback who is only 27 years old, Steven Nelson, who was the Texans' number 2 corner last year, but played the best of any corner, who's obviously created some off-season headlines of his own with some Instagram posts. You got Desmond King, number 0, which is going to be weird to see in an NFL roster, but he played, I thought, pretty well last year. And Tavia Thomas, but you mentioned, it's a loaded corner group. And I do think that there are some possibilities of guys maybe not even making the roster among all of those names that we listed.
Yeah.
Is it Shaquille Griffin because he's not able to get back from the back injury? Is it Steven Nelson, and who, if they were to cut, they would be able to save the most money? Is it a surprise cut like that? That positional group, I think, is going to be, DJ, of all the positional battles, the most interesting on this team.
Yeah, I agree. Because every other spot, right, like, is the linebacker position battle is really interesting? Not necessarily, because we're not projecting like this. There's upside there, and there's like high expectations. The D-line room, we kind of know Malik and Sheldon going to be starters. Hughes is going to be a starter, or maybe compete with Gennard for the other end spot. Will's going to start. Quarterback, we know who's going to start. Running back is going to be Pearson Devin. The receiver battle, it's still going to be on Robert's going to be a starter. Nico's going to be a starter. So maybe between Tank / Mechie / Noah Brown. But like when you mention like the cornerback room, that's very interesting because like there's legitimate NFL starters that can play on other teams right now. Not saying the receiver room can't do that, the linebacker room can't do that either. But it's like they can start, and we think that they could be a top 10 unit group, right? We don't expect the Texans receiver room or linebacker receiver room to be a top 10 group.
Right, exactly.
Right, where the cornerback, we think it could be that, and there could be some turnover, mainly because you got, as you mentioned, Steven Nelson, you can get out of his deal with ease, or Shaquille, who doesn't have that much guaranteed, things of that nature. So, yeah, I mean, if Shaquille gets back to playing how he was playing when he was in Seattle, and let's say Steven's around and he's playing how he looked last year, now you got 3 corners. You really got to make a decision. You got, obviously, Stingley continues to develop, and he looks like he looked out spring. Now you got 3 legitimate NFL starters on the boundaries, paired with, again, like who you got in the slot with Tyvier and Desmond King. Like that group is true. I mean, obviously, a safety group overall, man. That loaded secondary when you think about it. When you really just look at it, Again, like you hear Houston Texans have a top 10 secondary, you're like, what?
It's a thing.
But then you look at it like, oh, okay, like it's a little bit of projection, sure, but usually for you to have a really good secondary, what you need is 2 really good players, and they have that, right? And Stingley, like really, like 2 guys that are that could be upper echelon players, and they have that in Sting and Petrie. So now we just kind of got to see if they can really step into that, because we already know what King is going to be. We know what Ward is going to be. We know what Tyree is going to be. We'll see about the other cornerback spot. Who's going to be the guy that mans that fourth down? We'll see. Who's going to win that? But we know whoever's on that spot, we know we're going to get from them. So, yeah, man. I agree with you. It's going to for sure be very interesting.
So one other positional group that could theoretically be a competition, but maybe one that's just for show, that will be interesting just because of the nature of the position, is quarterback, because we're not 100% sure that it's going to be something that CJ Stroud is just handed. I feel like it's trending in that direction, DJ, but that could be interesting. The longer it plays out, I know a lot of people are going to complain about it.
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a really good question. So let me ask you this. I'm gonna spin it back to you. So when is too long? Like when is too long of the quarterback position battle? It starts to get concerning.
It's a good question because for all we know, the management could be thinking to themselves, we're just not going to put him in right away unless we know what the offensive line is. I think from what we've seen thus far, though, DJ, with him already, CJ Stroud getting first team reps, I would say that if this is something in the 2 weeks that lead up to the first preseason game, I would say if by the start of the second week of the preseason, we're still looking at Davis Mills under center, I'm not going to be concerned. I'm more just going to be annoyed because I do think that inevitably they are just going to pull the plug on Davis Mills. And I feel for Mills in that spot, but he knows the deal. I mean, he had his opportunity last year. Stroud is the second overall pick, and of course they're going to put him in at some point.
Right.
Really, any talk of a competition that's going to happen, and it's going to be based on like clickbaity headlines by third-rate Texans blogs.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're right. Because again, like it's just hard to imagine. Like we're going into like the last week of the preseason, and we still don't know who the starter is. That I think that would be concerning, mainly because you're showing us you're not that you're not ready, but you're showing us you might not be ready to develop a quarterback. Because again, I can understand if the guy was with like Andy Dalton or like not Geno Smith, but like maybe Jacoby Brissett or like a guy that started before and has had some level of success, right? Then I could hear it out just a little bit more. You're talking about a guy that was tied for the league lead interception that he didn't even start every game last year. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're competing with that, I mean, if we're still like having a charade go on about that, that's when it gets a little tricky because it's like we know what the ceiling is with Davis. We know what it is. You drafted CJ because you think that ceiling could be one of the better quarterbacks in this league. So let's start the development process, not the maturation process. If him playing too early is what makes him flame out, then he was never going to succeed anyway.
100%.
You know, like I've heard people say like, "Oh, Zach played too early." Well, like I remember I think Mike LaFleur said that publicly that the former Jets offensive coordinator that Zach maybe could have benefited from sitting. Sure, but who is he going to sit for? Mike White, James Morgan? Like you had to play him. Like you had to play him. And if that's what crumbled him, he was never going to succeed in the first place.
One last thing, DJ. Before we hit the road, we're going to have actual stuff to react to on the next episode of the show.
Yeah,
I thought what we could do, a very quick draft of the most impactful players on the Houston Texans roster right now.
Okay, cool.
We're going to go back and forth because it's a two-person draft. Snake is confusing when it's two people.
You got the first pick.
Oh, I get the first pick. Oh, I got to take Laramie Tunsil. Laramie Tunsil is the best player on this team and is arguably the best left tackle in the National Football League. So, got to take Laramie. And I feel like that would have been your pick if you were picking first overall too, right?
Absolutely. So, have we started already, or
we've started? I don't even think we need to explain Laramie Tunsil. Like this is obvious. He's the number one player on this team.
Okay, for sure. Joe, make sure you get that draft music going. But Dun, 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 dun. I think so we're gonna do 5 rounds, right? So like it's gonna be
Let's do
10 players.
5.
All right, cool. So I would go for me, the second most impactful player would have to be for the 2023 season, most impactful player. It probably have to be Damian Pierce. Because Damian Pierce right now, like if you have a good run game, it takes pressure off of CJ. You know what I'm saying? Like that's gonna take he has to be impactful. Because if he's not impactful and let's say receivers aren't as good as CJ needs, now we're looking at a sitting duck. So I'm gonna go Damian.
I think that's a good pick because I do think it's about realistically, like who's the guy that you trust the most to make an impact over the course of the year.
Yep.
And I think for now, like it's probably going to be a lot of growing pains for CJ Stroud. Last year, I did the same exercise when I was doing the show on the radio, and I did not pick Davis Mills as one of my top 5 guys. I looked at Pierce as one of them. Tunsil obviously is one of them. I think I had Brandon Cooks, Jerry Hughes, and I might have put Jalen Petrie in there. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was based off of training camp, and also I might have had Stingley in there as well. I got to go find the tweet itself. I felt pretty good about it after the fact. But I think Pierce is a smart one because you're right. They're going to need to run the football to win games this season. And if he gets injured, that's going to really make Stroud's life a living hell because no matter how you feel about Devin Singletary, are you expecting him to carry the entire workload of an offensive running game? I don't know about that. All right, it comes back to me. So there are a lot of ways I could go here. I could take the quarterback here. I also could take Titus Howard. I also could go safety because we know what Jalen Petrie was able to do last year. And while I want to take Derek Stingley here, I'm going to go with Jalen Petrie with the 4th pick of the most impactful Houston Texans draft, or the 3rd pick of the most impactful Houston Texans draft.
Okay. All right. So with the 4th pick, most impactful in 2023, I'm going to go with Derek Stingley.
There you go.
I think Derek Stingley is going to have one of those seasons that make people forget the fact that they took him over Sauce. I think at that position, I don't think it matters if one guy's better than the other, right? Like that doesn't necessarily matter. It just matters like can he be an impactful player for you and an impactful player across the league? It's not like quarterback, right? Like if you miss that quarter, like if you take a quarterback but the guy behind you is drastically better, then that's a little different because like the quarterback position is just drastically more important than every other position in all sports.
Okay. So that's pick number 4. At 5, I am torn because, again, I've listed a couple of them. We just took 2 of them off the board. At some point, we do have to take CJ Stroud. But at this point in time, am I comfortable saying that what the quarterback does, which does seem so obvious, in a year where there's not going to be that much expected of him compared to maybe the next season, is he going to be more impactful than the longest tenured veteran on the defense who you're hoping is going to open things up for Will Anderson, especially considering how well the guy played last year? So I'm going to take Jerry Hughes at number 5. Hughes played great last season.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't all season long, but he started off the year extremely strong. And you would think that, as we mentioned on last week's episode, if he's opposite Will Anderson, can he unlock things for Will Anderson as the season goes along? So I'll take Hughes in that spot.
So all right, so that's pick number 5. Pick number 5. Pick number 6. I'm going to go Titus Howard. Yeah, I'm going to go Titus Howard.
Good call.
Yeah, I mean he played at a Pro Bowl level at the tackle position. So without question, I have to again. Every time I'm going to be most impactful in 2023, right?
Right.
It's just I don't think people realize how rare it is for like rookies to like be ultra impactful. Like I'm not saying like the rookies that they took can't.
Neither of us are.
Guys, but it's just hard to predict that because you just never know, right?
Unless you're a running back or something like that, where you're going to be thrown right into the fire.
Right, or if you're a wide receiver playing with a really good quarterback, then okay, cool. But like, there's a learning curve for a lot of these guys. So
now it gets tricky because there are some guys who are still on the board, and I know people are screaming, take CJ Stroud here. Can't let him go past 7. So I got to take CJ Stroud 7th.
Oh, you took him?
I'm taking him again. Like, if they have a plus offense this season,
Okay.
after Dameon Pierce, after the 2 tackles,
Yeah.
that's the guy that you're looking at.
Okay. That's fair. Yeah, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. So at 8, I will probably go. I'll probably go Dalton Schultz, right? Because again, like Dalton Schultz is statistically over the past 3 seasons has been a top 10 tight end. In the 2022 ESPN rankings by NFL players, NFL players, coaches, and execs, he was the 8th best tight end in all of football. That's how they voted him. The Texans got him for a really good. I mean, they got him on the free agency market. I think his salary in total was probably, if you include signing bonus, like $10 million. So yeah, I would, if CJ is gonna, if it's gonna be plus offense, CJ has to play well too, but he's gonna also need his tight end and some of the other receiving weapons to help elevate him and make the offense better on paper.
I like that. Of all the guys in the passing game, like that's the guy you're pointing at. I know a lot of people want to do it with Nico Collins. We got to see it first. We do. And last year I think was the year where you would expect something from Collins. And look, Davis Mills was not good last year, so it's not necessarily all his fault. But we've seen Schultz produce before as one of the better tight ends in the league, and generally a tight end can be quite the whoopee, if you will, for a quarterback that's looking for basically like something that he can consistently rely on in the passing game. So with pick 9, the last of my picks, there are plenty of options left on the table. Bringing in a guy like Jimmy Ward to the defense is definitely, I think, a big add, especially considering his familiarity with the D'Amico Ryans defense in the past. You also have as potential options Christian Harris, because you like the way that he played in the second half of the season. And of course, there's Will Anderson still left on the board as well, the 3rd overall pick. So I feel like I have to pick one of these 3 guys. If I'm talking about impactful, especially considering who has familiarity with the team, am I going to do Jimmy Ward here? I'm like trying to talk myself out of it. I think I want to do Christian Harris.
Go ahead, take him. I know I'm taking next.
I think I know who you're taking next too, and I almost want to just prevent you from taking it. So I'm just going to take Will Anderson.
You just took him?
I took Will Anderson. Yeah.
Well,
I don't want you to have him.
I'm gonna make sure to. Don't worry, there'll be authorities at your door knocking on your door, ready to arrest you. Okay. All right. So for my last pick, I'll go Robert Woods. Because again, if it's gonna be a plus offense, you're gonna need, you're gonna need your tight end and receiver to at least be respectable. So, I think Robert and
he's got the potential to do it. I mean, we've seen him do it before. He was once one of the most underrated receivers in the league.
Yep, I agree. So
there you go. Most impactful Texas players draft. Do we make a graphic for it and post it out for all the world to see, or do we not? Because no one's going to understand our explanation of it by the end of it. I don't know. We'll see.
I agree.
He is DJ Bien-Aime. Make sure you check out all of his work, as Houston Texans training camp is just a week away from us. You can hear my show, The Paul Gallant Show, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5, 10 to noon every single weekday. So long, farewell, and have yourselves a wonderful week. Peace.